Alright everyone, I'm going to give you a quick kind of tutorial here how to get started using No Limits. I know most of you have already played a little bit with it, but we're going to get to the nitty gritty of this so you can start building your coaster. So here's what the generic screen will look like. Remember that you have all of the things up top here to be able to toggle through. The main things we're going to focus on now are like your different views, like top view, front view, left view, 3D view. And remember, under the view tab, there's also the other, so the opposites of those, like front, back, left, and right. So we're going to start now kind of in just the top view. So if you zoom out, this is kind of all the area you have to work with. So you have a lot of space to do different things as you're working through this. Now, one thing is just with your design and everything that you want to first kind of start with is where this little arrow here, when I click on that blue dot, this is where my coaster kind of has to start, somewhere along this point. So wherever your station is kind of in your design, you don't have to leave it here in the middle. So if your station maybe starts down here on the page, or just you want it to start down here, you can do that and you can move it. Now, looking at the first thing you're going to do is you need to create a station. So NoTrack, it won't let you run the simulator. It won't let you do anything if you don't have a station. So I'm going to zoom in here, zoom in a little more to where we are. Now, as you zoom in more and more, you start to see these little white dots. Just something to note, and even when you flip between the views. So right now I'm in top view, but if I go to like left view, you see those dots again. Every one of those dots, like the space between them, represents 1 meter. So depending on how many dots there are and things like that, that's going to represent 1 meter of kind of distance or height, anything like that. So depending on the kind of coaster that you are making, you can, since we'll stay in left view, I can move this now up and down because you see it was pretty close to the ground. I can now move this up and down. Most coasters are going to be a little off the ground because they have to have some kind of supports associated with them. So we can kind of start right here. So we have our coaster and where our first track is going to start. So that's about, like, based on the dots, about 5-ish meters off the ground, 5 or 6. So what I can then do, you can either, if you go to track, you can select things from there, but we want to click this button up here, which is going to add a new vertex of track or part of a track. So I click on that, make sure I've clicked it. So now I'm going to add track. So wherever I click, it's going to start adding track, so you don't want to start clicking everywhere because then you're just going to get a bunch of pieces that are going 100 different directions. Under the track tab, we want to make sure we have station segment. So this is important as you're changing different parts of the track. You want to definitely be able to change and move between them, so making sure you're putting the right kind of track down. So what I'm going to do, well, I'm going to go back here real quick. So you want a little bit of a decline to that's just a tip I learned from when I started first working with No Limits. You want to have a little bit of a decline to your station. So clicking on that and then kind of tilting one of these vertices allow you to move it kind of up and down. So kind of tilting that forward just a tad, so you have a bit of a decline, so that when you then add your track again, we click this button here, go to track, go to station segment, and I'm going to click your station. How long it is doesn't really matter that much. You want to be able to obviously fit a car, a train into the station, but I'm going to click out about 2 kind of big boxes. You can kind of see the bigger grid lines, the darker white ones. So if I click right out here, so I start to have a station. Now there's my station. So I'm now going to click back here. So if you want to move stuff or adjust things, you definitely need to make sure you click on this arrow, this cursor here. So then I'm able to click on the vertices, and you can kind of see it's a little kind of uneven, and you can just start to like adjust these lines a little bit. Again, not the biggest concern, but you can just kind of start to move some things just to straighten a few of the things out. Now, one key thing to mention, right now we're in left view. We definitely want to go up to like top view make sure that everything is actually kind of straight. And again, if you zoom in, you can use these kind of markers as kind of guides. So, this yellow line should really run along um, these dots here in the middle. So making sure everything's like good from the different views. So we're kind of good there. I can also go to 3D view if I want to. Where's that? Way over here. So I can kind of see, it's a good solid station. It's straight, it's off the ground. We're going to be good. So now if I go back to top view, or let's go back to left view actually. So back to left view. Now, depending on what you are doing with your coaster, if it's a launch coaster, if it just goes straight into a lift hill, whatever it might be, and I know some of you were thinking about even putting your coasters higher up on the ground, so that's something you can definitely do. I'm just going to show you kind of some of the basics and things that will apply later, but one thing to note, if you're doing a launch coaster, you're going to want to, after you've kind of set it up, and once you get more track, you're going to want to play with this a little bit, double clicking on here, and to make it a launch kind of coaster, you just need to simply double click on it and then click launch. So that changes the station from a normal station to a launch station. And then this is how much acceleration. So it says 1.6 G, so 1.6 times the force of gravity to acceleration due to gravity. So we're moving at about, can't do that math in my head, like 15 meters per second squared. So every second, our velocity is going to increase by 15 meters per second. You can increase that. Obviously, you just then need to watch, how many G forces you're putting on your riders. So if I'm going to use a lift hill, so I'm going to go back to station. So the track segment's up here. Go to track. I'm going to click lift segment because that's what I'm kind of building next. Now, one key thing to mention whenever you are building your coaster, the less individual pieces of track, the better. So what I don't want to do is just start to make my hill just start clicking, in which it's already a tangled mess, and just keep clicking and make 15 pieces for my track. That is not what I want to do. So I'm just going to undo all that. So you want as few pieces as possible. Really, with a lift hill or something like that, you really can just get away with making it in 2 pieces. So what I'm going to do, here's where my lift hill is going to start, way down here. I'm going to click somewhere up here, and depending on if you really want to be technical and try to figure out how high that is, otherwise just kind of click and just guess and then look. So there's that piece. So there's my main lift. And one other tip is to connect it with another, so your secondary, the actual lift portion of that, kind of where this blue dot is right now, this vertice, you want to click a little further out from it. So kind of straight out to the left and click right here. Now, it looks really bad right now, but that's again why we have to move between the views and kind of fix some things. So we can see that this, and if we go to top view, scroll over to that part, right, we can see it's kind of tangled, and it's kind of crooked, the track is. So if we go to front view, where's our track? You can kind of see that again, right? It looks good, but it's just kind of, you can see this yellow line, kind of, we want that to be over top of the track. So I'm going to go back to the left view. What we can do, these vertices, this kind of shortens and extends the pieces of track. So what we can do is start to shorten those pieces up. So then we're just kind of adjusting the track's kind of depth, or I don't know really what you call it. We're just adjusting it. So then what you want, these 2 vertices, so if I click on both of them, shift or Apple click, yep, there we go. On both of them, I kind of want them to have the same angle. So I want them to kind of mirror each other. So clicking on them right now, I can kind of see this one right here is a little less steep. So I want to definitely kind of bring this one down a little bit, which will kind of bring out that natural kind of crest, a really nice crest on my hill. So if I click and hold again, right now I can see that there's kind of, now if I try to move them together, that moves the whole track. But what I can do is kind of bring that down maybe just a little more and go through some things like that. So now I have a nice, and now what I want to do is definitely look at, is everything here, it looks great. It looks straight. It looks like it's a nice hill, and it could be, but we need to switch between our views. So here's front view, right? We have a nice kind of hill going up and coming over. So we've got a good hill there. If we go left, which is where we were, go to top, right? Everything looks good. It's nice and straight. That yellow line's kind of running down the middle of the track. And I can also, if I really want to see it, I can click on 3D view, click Control and click, and boom. If I zoom out up a little higher, above it, right, I've got a nice kind of hill associated with my track. So I can kind of see that. It looks really nice. And then one other way you can check that is if you go to display and we click show on board, so that when we're in 3D mode, when I go like this, it puts me along the track, and it's just like I'm writing it, but I'm just writing it as I've designed it. So right, I'm going up a hill, going, and ta-da, I'm at the top. So it's nice and straight. We can see that. We get a really good look at it. Nothing's kind of whopper-jawed or anything's moving around too much. So I'm in a good kind of spot with that, right? So that's kind of the first initial, first steps as far as, getting your stations created and getting your first hill created from that station, or any other launch sequence or anything you're going to have in the middle of your rides. You can definitely do that. So that's kind of your first step, regardless if you have a launch sequence or lift hill to start. Most of you are probably going to have a hill to kind of store that energy initially. So just thinking about those kind of things as you're working.